My name's Nick Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Rowntrees Society. The Rowntrees Society's purpose is to build and share histories of the Rowntree family, company and trust. Over the last few months we've been conducting a project called Refugees and Rowntrees, where we've been looking at the history of how Rowntrees helped refugees. This project looks at the 20th century and we've been investigating and telling three stories. The first is Belgian refugees who came to York in the First World War. The second is Jean and Tessa's time helping refugees escape from Prague in Czechoslovakia during the Second World War. And thirdly, we've been exploring stories of Ugandan Asians who came to York after they were expelled by Idi Amin in the 1970s. For this documentary, we're going to go to some of the locations that were important to these stories, and we're going to tell them there. So we're here at the Mount School in York. This is one of two Quaker schools in the city, and we're here as part of the Rowntrees Society's Refugees and Rowntrees project, and that's because this school has played a role in some of the stories that we've been looking into as part of the project. One of those stories is that of the Belgian refugees who came to York in 1914, fleeing the advance of the German army through Belgium at the start of the First World War. We know some of the story about the refugees who arrived in York because Joan Rowntree, who was the niece of Fred Rowntree, the architect who designed some of the buildings at this school, she wrote about her experience helping the refugees in the school magazine. The Mount pupils went to the Quaker meeting house in the centre of town, which was being used as a kind of holding base for refugees arriving in York from Belgium. The refugees would come in groups of around 100 and were given food and water and bedding at the central Quaker meeting house. Pupils from the Mount were there to assist them, to look after babies who had gone on what was often quite an arduous journey. And Joan wrote this account for the Mount magazine and provided some fantastic illustrations to show what was going on there. And from the Quaker meeting house, the refugees would spend maybe a few nights there before going on to houses around the city that had been found for them. And some of those houses were provided by the Rowntrees in New Earswick. So we're in the garden village of New Earswick. This village was built by the Rowntrees to provide good quality housing for working people. In 1914, the Belgian refugees who were being helped by the Rowntrees lived around here, in these houses here and those two over there. The houses were prepared and got ready for the Belgian families to move into them by teams of volunteers that were workers at the factory, and each team was given a different house to prepare, to decorate, to furnish and get some food in and all those things that you'd want when you'd arrive somewhere. We know a little bit about the Belgian refugees who were housed in this house because they were the Van Eickhout family. Their 14-year-old daughter attended some of the education at the Cocoa Works, and she wrote a piece for the Cocoa Works magazine detailing their escape from Belgium. Their village was on the front line, and so they had to get out very quickly and ended up walking 150 miles to the coast to come to Britain. Their father had to hide in a well for 2 days before they were able to escape. So in 1914, the house behind us was made available for Gustav Adams and his family, as well as another young couple. They were Belgian refugees who'd had to flee the fighting there in the First World War. We know a bit about Gustav Adams' journey to get here because he wrote quite a long piece for the Cocoa Works magazine. The Adams family owned a hotel in Belgium, and originally when the German army invaded, a unit of German soldiers stayed there and they asked Mr. Adams for help, for food and for shelter, and then they left, but another unit came afterwards and they burnt the hotel down. Mr. Adams took shelter in the basement, but the German soldiers set fire to hay bales and rolled them into the basement. He was able to escape but was captured, and was then able to escape the German soldiers who were guarding him because they got drunk and fell asleep. And again, he then had to walk all the way, meet up with his family to be able to get to a port to take them to Britain. We're here at the Cocoa Works. This was Rowntrees factory and headquarters based here in York. But it was more than a factory, it was a place of community. There were sports teams based here, there were other hobbies and interest groups here, education, and thousands of workers who were working here. So in the autumn of 1914, workers in this factory raised money together to support the Belgian refugees who were coming to York. The amount of money that the workers raised here for the Belgian refugees was the equivalent of around £17,000 in today's money. That money was spent to provide living costs such as food and furnishings and bedding to help the refugees settle in once they got to their new houses. The Belgian refugees were also given jobs in this factory. The few of them who weren't able to work for various reasons were continued to be supported by the funds that the workers in this factory raised for them. So not only did Belgian refugees get jobs at the factory at the Cocoa Works, but they also got involved in some of the other activities. With the education, some of them started giving French lessons to the workers at the factory. So we're back at the Mount School in the library here to talk about the story of Jean and Tessa Rowntree, who, when they were in their late 20s and early 30s, were involved in efforts to help refugees escape from Czechoslovakia, particularly Prague, that was in danger of being invaded by the Nazis. So in 1938, Tessa Rowntree, who is the daughter of Arnold and May Rowntree, was on a holiday with a friend travelling down the Danube. When they got to Vienna, they stopped to help groups of Quakers that were helping refugees who'd been coming into Vienna after the Germans annexed Austria. While she was there and involved in those efforts, she got a message from Emma Cadbury of that other famous Quaker chocolate firm to come to Prague, where they were having refugees arriving there. She arrived in Prague and it was less organised than the efforts in Vienna. And a lot of the refugees were political opponents to the Nazis, and that included trade unionists as well. So Tessa started helping them getting paperwork together, transport paperwork, visas, etc. And then she contacted her cousin, Jean Rowntree, and Jean is the daughter of John Wilhelm and Connie Rowntree. Both Tessa and Jean had been pupils at the Mount here, and they both were involved. Tessa, particularly at that point when her cousin arrived, was more involved in escorting groups of refugees on trains out of Czechoslovakia, and they had to go through what was often German-controlled territory, particularly in Poland. And so there would be Nazi officers checking their travel paperwork, and sometimes Tessa had to be involved in bribing them to allow the refugees through. Meanwhile, Jean was much more involved in trying to find countries that would take the refugees so that they would be able to issue them with travel documents to be able to escape Prague. Both women were involved in this work that was very brave. There were lots of dangers to their own safety. And when the German army invaded Czechoslovakia, Jean was actually back in London because she was splitting her time between London for work and going to Prague. And she got a message to tell her not to come back to Prague. However, Tessa was still in Prague and got involved in trying to destroy travel documents, passports, and other paperwork related to the refugees who'd not been able to get out yet. And Tessa was able to escape Prague on one of the last successful Kinder transports, where she was escorting children to escape the Nazi invasion. So after they left Prague, both Jean and Tessa continued to be involved in humanitarian efforts throughout the Second World War. So 50-ish years after the Belgian refugees came to York, in the 1970s, another group of refugees sought shelter here, and those were Ugandan Asians who'd been expelled from their country by Idi Amin. The UK worked out different places where they could settle the Ugandan Asian refugees and places where they couldn't be. The places where they couldn't be settled were known as red locations, and places where they could be settled were known as green. As you can imagine, there were lots of debates within the country about where the refugees could be settled and found homes. But York became a green area, and one of the main reasons that they were invited to settle here was because Rowntrees at the cocoa works here provided jobs for the Ugandan refugees, and this was one of the main reasons why they were designated as a green area. So the Rowntrees Society, as part of our Refugees and Rowntrees project, has been speaking to some of the Ugandan refugees and their families who worked here. They recollect finding a sense of community at Rowntrees Cocoa Works. They raved about how great the food was in the dining block, which is just across the road from us. Some of them said outside of the factory they did face racism and discrimination. So we're back here outside the Rowntrees office. I hope that you have found those stories interesting and that it's uncovered part of York's history and people from York who perhaps don't get talked about as much and is a little bit hidden. If you'd like more information about our Refugees and Rowntrees project or any of the other work we're doing, then you can find that on the Rowntrees Society's website. And if you also want to see more of our content on YouTube, then please like, share and subscribe.